ॐ तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भुरिदा जनाः। We were discussing the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, 11th March 1885. Sri Ramakrishna was explaining the difference between divine wisdom, that is intuitive wisdom, and book learning. So he said how during his sadhana he came in contact with different ideas. Whatever he wanted to know, he could understand, or he could have the knowledge of that by mere prayer to the Divine Mother. That's what he's saying. And he's trying to explain it to doctor, who was really surprised to know that without reading any books, Sri Ramakrishna had access to the divine knowledge. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling the doctor, when I used to lie on the ground in Panchavati, I would call on the Divine Mother. Mother, please show me what the karmis, the ritualists, have achieved through their rituals, the yogis through their yoga, and the jnanis through reasoning. I used to say much more. How to tell you that? Now he is telling, I can't explain to you how I had access to the wonderful wisdom which was contained in the Shastras without even having to read those books. It simply came to me. That doesn't mean he did not hear it. This important thing you should remember. People say because he was illiterate, Sri Ramakrishna could not read, or he did not go to university or school. He was incapable, he was not capable of understanding the scriptural truths. But when he asked Mother for the knowledge that is contained in the scriptures, he somehow got it, either through direct intuition, or the Divine Mother arranged to send great Pandits like Vaishnavacharan, Bhairavi Brahmani, who came and instructed everything and verified the statement of the Shastras that the scriptures have to be heard first, Shruti. So that is why Swami Vivekananda, in his famous essay, famous small article which he distributed free on Sri Ramakrishna's birthday in Dakshineshwar, that book, Hindu Dharma, Sanatan Hindu Dharma, O Sri Ramakrishna. That was the title of that book, Sri Ramakrishna, Sanatan Hindu Dharma. In that he shows that our Sanatana Dharma believes that knowledge acquired through intuition or through experience, through direct experience, is totally different or far superior to that experienced by or that understood by reading the scriptures. That was what Swamiji says. And just to demonstrate that, Swamiji says, Sri Ramakrishna came deliberately in this incarnation. He discarded all external forms of learning. So there is a reason for him being unable to attend school and discard formal learning, just to show that in the purified mind of rishis who have done sadhana, any rishi, any holy person who does sadhana according to the instructions of the Guru or according to the instructions of the Shastras and purifies his mind thoroughly, in his mind the necessary knowledge required to liberate a jiva appears or is experienced spontaneously. These truths appear spontaneously in the minds of these people whose minds and whose body, everything has been purified by their sadhana. So that is why Sri Ramakrishna says he used to go to the Divine Mother and not just go and say. We may also go and say, tell the Divine Mother, give us this knowledge, give us that. But she may not give unless we have purified ourselves and really opened ourselves to this intuitive knowledge of experience. So Mother will either give the experience directly, as she did when she gave the first experience to Sri Ramakrishna. Many of his gurus had perhaps not come. But after that, he wanted to taste the same experience through different paths. So when that desire arose in his mind, one after another the gurus came, the Vaishnavas came, the Vaishnava Guru, Vaishnava Charan, Gauri Pandit, and so many scholars. And he also took part, he heard a lot of scriptures. So that is why he says, he went to the Divine Mother and asked her, and she gave him the knowledge. How to tell you all that? He is telling the rational Dr. Sarkar that how can I tell you, and even if I tell you of my experiences, will you believe that? Because these are certain things which are not observable in ordinary people in this universe. This intuition, the power of intuition and listening to things and understanding in a different way that the essence of the scriptures as opposed to the intellectual reasoning or understanding of the scriptures. These things are matters of experience. So a person who has experienced that, you cannot deny his experience. So Sri Ramakrishna says, oh, what a state I passed through. Sleep was lost to me. Such people, they are so excited by their new discovery that they don't need much sleep. Sleep is needed to people whose minds are agitated, and not only in the waking state but also in the dream state. When in the waking state we busy ourselves with so many unnecessary things and which give rise to a lot of mental waves which exhaust us, and then the same thing continues. It is a thing which we have, a problem which we have created ourselves. We have to learn how not to get influenced and carry it over into the dream state. In the dream also we will be dreaming things which we perhaps could not do or were not able to do in the waking state. So somehow the dream start as soon as we go to sleep and we really don't get sleep. So the people who meditate, they have less need for sleep because whatever little sleep the body requires because of tiredness, because of the every human body or every jiva, there is a mechanism in the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha which conserves the prana by putting all the other activities except the vital activities like breathing, like heartbeat and all those things. Only those pranas work. All the other pranas and the Annamaya Kosha for the time being is put to rest, and the Manomaya Kosha, the very hyperactive Manomaya Kosha, is put to rest when there is even no dream. Otherwise the Manomaya Kosha, if it is active as in the case of dream state, though you may not be doing things, you may not be doing the work or you may not be traveling anywhere, but in the dream you will be doing all those things. Even those dreams can be very exhaustive. Dreams or nightmares can be exhaustive because this constant thinking, it causes a lot of strain on the body also, the Annamaya Kosha. So the body has a mechanism. The animals also have this. Every human being or living being has a mechanism where it can get some rest and the bodies can recoup. The cells of the body also require rest. It has been working continuously. So there is a mechanism, it is an auto mechanism which is due to ignorance. Sleep is not something which can be induced. It is something which fatigue or we just fall asleep. We don't say that we choose to go to sleep, deep sleep. It is not a matter of choice. When you are extremely tired, the body somehow, but even then, there are some people who suffer from insomnia. The reason is that there is so much of activity that even if the body is sleeping, even if the body, Annamaya Kosha and Pranamaya Kosha is quiet, the mind is so much agitated. It is a problem created by ourselves by taking things very seriously, by not detaching ourselves from things which do not concern us, or even from things which disturb us or concern us, but there should be a mechanism where we can switch off our personality to the outside world. And when that happens through meditation, then you require less sleep, because sleep, that need for sleep is reduced. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says, "Oh, what a state I passed through! Sleep was lost to me." Saying this, Sri Ramakrishna sings a beautiful song where I have, which is a Bengali song. "I have shaken off my sleep. How can I fall into slumber again? For I am wide awake in the sleeplessness of union with God, with the Divine Mother." Once you are in the state of yoga, where the mind has been, the waves of the mind, the vrittis of the mind have been quietened, and you are in communion with the highest reality, then that is far, far superior than sleep itself. If we can stay in that state even for a few moments, that is equivalent to sleep which is full of dreams and disturbing. So the period of sleep really doesn't matter. Even if we sleep for 4 hours and dream for 3.5 hours, what's the use? Unless you get sleep or you meditate, that's why Sri Ramakrishna says, "I have shaken off my sleep." How can you shake off your sleep? How can I fall into a slumber again? For I am awake in the sleeplessness of union. Sleeplessness of union with the Divine Mother. Now that sleeplessness is not the sleeplessness which is caused by a person who is full of worry, anxiety and tension because of lack of control of his mind. When that happens, sleeplessness comes and you have to artificially induce sleep by various means, sleeping tablets and other things. You have to forcibly switch off the activity of the brain and the mind by using external help. But if you are awake in the sleeplessness of the union with the Lord, then Sri Ramakrishna says, "I had put sleep to sleep." The poet also says, "I have put sleep to sleep. I don't need sleep now. I can do with less sleep." And that is why we find in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, if you read his biography, The Divine Play or The Great Master, there he is found to be a very, very, he used to sleep for very, very small time. He did not need much sleep. "O Divine Mother, made one with you at last, my slumber I have lulled sleep for evermore." So he's quoting the second line, he's singing that song. And this Bengali song shows the importance of divine love or communion with God or Divine Mother, which helps us to put sleep to sleep. "I have lulled sleep for evermore." Then Sri Ramakrishna says, "I have read no books, but you see I repeat the Divine Mother's name, so they all show me respect." Now he's telling this like a child. It may appear to be a very simple thing, but it is a profound truth, a profound idea, which is at the base of the sadhana of mantra yoga. Mantra yoga depends on the repetition of the mantra, which has two effects. One is to quieten the unnecessary and the useless vrittis, the mental waves which give rise to all our trouble, which disturb us, which cause pain, which cause both physical as well as mental pain, or physical disturbance in the prana, and also the disturbance, consequently it disturbs the Annamaya Kosha also. So, when you repeat the Divine Mother's name, the effect is twofold. First of all, the mantra has an intrinsic power to negate the effects of the past karma. This is one thing one should firmly believe, because that is the whole science of Mantra Shastra, which along with the bija and the technique of meditation tells us that constant repetition of the mantra helps us in two ways. First, it subdues the waves, and secondly, it destroys the remnant of whatever karma. So if you had, as mother says, if you had to suffer a sword wound because of your past karma, you see, all of our suffering is because of our past karma. So we have to accept that fact. We cannot deny that. We cannot shun or we cannot run away from that. Since we have to accept it, why not reduce its intensity? That is the only thing we can do. It is going to come again and again. But Sri Ramakrishna gives a wonderful idea that he says, I repeat the mother's name so people show me respect. Now people don't show you respect. That means if I had not repeated the mother's name, people would not have respected me. So how is it possible that just by repeating mother's name he gets respect? He gets respect because he progresses in sadhana, or any sadhaka. It's not Sri Ramakrishna alone, but anybody who repeats the holy name. What happens is the subtle vibrations of that mantra, first of all, it purifies our own mind and it purifies the surrounding atmosphere. So whatever disturbances are there, not only in your mind but in the minds of others, whose minds are intimately connected. So every time we go into their vicinity, if we sincerely repeat the mantra, or if we sincerely believe in the power of vibrations of these mantra, someday or the other, it may take time depending on how much karma we have to negate. But he says, I repeat the Divine Mothers. It's a simple logic. He's saying as if a child is telling somebody that I repeat the Divine Mother's name and that's why they give me respect. But people have other ideas. People of the world, people who have worldly ideas, they believe that respect can be forced by virtue of one's wealth or by virtue of one's power. We try to extract respect from other people. But if we see deeply, people don't respect such people. Out of fear, they may make a show of respect. But such a person is not respected or honored. True respect, according to Sri Ramakrishna, can come only if you repeat the Divine Mother's or your Ishta's name. Because when you have calmed the waves of your mind, when you have acquired some kind of, when there is some transformation in you, then the waves in the minds of people around you also change. They are also influenced. That is the power of the divine name, and they spontaneously show such a person respect. Sri Ramakrishna did not have the ego. He didn't feel that he was superior to anybody. But his simplicity attracted people like the doctor, atheists. The doctor was an atheist. But somehow something attracted this childlike simplicity of Sri Ramakrishna and his purity. Normally, childlike simplicity is associated with purity. It is only when maturity, the so-called worldly maturity comes, then the purity is lost. Swami Vivekananda, in one of his sayings, beautiful sayings, he says, when the child is born and when it starts growing up, the world grabs or the world forcibly takes away his childlike vision. The child is born with an intuitive vision. It sees things in a totally different way. It is at peace with itself. The child is peace with itself and also with the world around it. The child does not have any problems, any complications. But Swamiji says, we rob the child of its vision. And by learning secular knowledge, so-called secular knowledge, not the real knowledge, that's why there is importance of Paravidya also. If it is given to the child along with the other knowledge, then he will be saved. He will not be robbed of his childlike vision. That vision will remain continuous even when he grows up. But Swamiji says knowledge robs him of this childlike knowledge, means the secular knowledge, the so-called knowledge of the world, of the gross world or the gross universe. So he says this childlike vision, the knowledge robs him of this childlike vision, but he can regain it. That hope is there. As Swamiji, as Sri Ramakrishna is saying that, he says he regains it by a higher knowledge, the superconscious knowledge or the intuitive knowledge. Now that knowledge, not that the lower knowledge is not important, if not complemented by this higher knowledge, by spiritual knowledge or the real intuitive knowledge, that knowledge can be harmful. It will rob you of the childlike vision. The vision of reality is taken away. So he says, Sri Ramakrishna says, I repeated the Divine Mother's name. So his education was in the University of the Divine Mother herself, as Swamiji said. So as Swamiji said, he never had any problem because his knowledge was perfect, because it was not second hand. The second hand knowledge that we acquire by going to universities gives us a kind of knowledge which will enable us to somehow survive in this world, but it will not solve our problems. It will sort part of our problems. It will perhaps cater to the needs of the Annamaya Kosha and the Pranamaya Kosha to some extent. But it will rob us of the higher vision, this knowledge. So that's why it has to be complemented with a higher knowledge, which Sri Ramakrishna says, I get by merely repeating Mother's name. Shambhu Malik said to me, here is Shantiram Singh, quite able to beat anybody even though he carries no sword or shield. That means the knowledge you gain through intuition or the knowledge of God or spiritual knowledge is far superior, and equipped with that knowledge, if necessary, you can navigate yourself through the world also. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna, when many people asked him, shall we live in the world? He said, why not? Why can't you live in the world? But to live in the world, to navigate, you have to use a boat and ensure that there is no water in the boat, water inside the boat. The water can remain outside the boat. Boats have to float in water. The water is harmful only if the water comes inside. So one knowledge may not prevent. The knowledge may have some small leaks. The boat may have a small leaks and the water may come. So along with knowledge, there will come so many things which will sink the boat. But if you seal those leaks by the help of spiritual knowledge, then the boat will not sink. It will float. It will live in the world, but it will know how to navigate in the world. So Sri Ramakrishna says, I don't run after respect. I don't demand respect from others. But I just repeat Mother's name and people respect me. Now this is worth trying. Everybody wants some kind of respect. Not out of ego, but everybody feels that they do not get the respect they really deserve. But when do you really deserve it? When you make yourself fit for it. And Sri Ramakrishna gives a very easy way, though apparently it's a small sentence. I don't know whether he was able to convince the doctor just by repeating, because he would ask for a scientific explanation. How can repeating the Divine Mother's name give him respect? and they would have perhaps casually dismissed this sentence. But not a single sentence from the gospel is casual. When M has noted it, it means Sri Ramakrishna has said something which is like gospel truth. It is God's gospel. Many people think gospel refers to the Christian scriptures. It is not that. The word gospel has come from God's spell or God's words. So whenever an incarnation or a prophetic person speaks, his words are the gospel. So you can say gospel of Holy Mother, gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, gospel according to Saint John, or gospel according to Saint Luke. So whatever they heard, just as M records these things, so also in the Bible and so also in the other scriptures, the words which have come out from these great people who had experienced a union with God, and thus they had direct access to experiential knowledge, which which Swamiji says was very natural in the minds of purified yogis. So to demonstrate that in every age, whoever has purified his mind and made them access this higher kind of knowledge, helping them to gain the child's vision back, is the knowledge which Sri Ramakrishna is speaking here. Though it may not satisfy the modern rationalist. He says, I repeat the Divine Mother's name, so they all show me respect. And then he gives the example of one Shantiram Singh, who could fight. It was something like a very great achievement, somebody fighting with his bare hands with people who have weapons in their hands. So they were so that what Sri Ramakrishna is hinting is, I can handle both spiritual people and the worldly people because I repeat God's name. That otherwise, why should he quote this example? And all laugh. It appears as if it is a joke, but it is not a joke. None of Sri Ramakrishna's utterances are, even though he says something in humor, with humor, they all laugh. But M has understood the significance. The people who really believed in him, had faith in him, they will believe every word what these people say, what the prophet says. So the gospel assumes so much significance. It is not just any sentence from any book. We think there are so many books printed, so many intellectual people write so many books, and people appreciate it. But all the help that we get from such books is give some exercise, some gymnastics of the brain, that's all. The mind gets some exercises, or sometimes it may lead to confusion also, reading of too many books. But reading of books like the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna gives us the gist, the essence of what we should do. In very few words and in a very simple way, giving similes which apparently are some kind of jokes, but behind that joke is some great truth. So now the talk turns to Girish Chandra Ghosh's play Buddha Charita. Now, as we read last time, Doctor was invited by Girish because Doctor was a famous person. So Girish used to give passes or invite such people, important personalities to come. But somehow Doctor was not very comfortable. So he says, you are a very bad man. Shall I have to visit the theatre every day? Any new drama comes and you ask me to come. I can't come like that. So that's why he's a little angry. So Sri Ramakrishna says to M, what is he saying? I don't understand. M just tries to avoid this. He doesn't want to go into controversy. So he says he liked the play very much. That means the doctor is complaining that if you invite me for such good plays again and again, then I'll be wasting a lot of my time. I can't do my work. So that's why he, out of maybe as a joke, he said, you are a very bad man. You can't expect me to come every day. Because the drama is good, shall I come and attend those things? Now, Sri Ramakrishna, the conversation about divine incarnation and incarnation of a god and an ordinary soul. A Ishvara, when he incarnates, he has certain characteristics and they are quite different from a sadhaka or an ordinary soul. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling Ishan, you haven't said anything. This man doctor doesn't believe in divine incarnation. Now Sri Ramakrishna sometimes used logic or wanted some debate, some kind of conversation, some kind of argument to take place, so that people who did not believe in people who did not believe in certain things, they got a chance to at least appreciate the other's point of view. So he is deliberately saying, he is asking Ishan, who believed in the incarnation of God. So he is telling, why don't you tell the doctor? Instead of directly telling the doctor, he says, you people argue, and his way of teaching was like that. He will make two people having different views argue with each other and then point out the flaws of both in the course of conversation so they don't feel hurt. That's a very good way of teaching, not directly telling somebody that you are wrong. So we saw the same thing happening, the conversation between Narendra and Girish also. But here, Ishan is tired because he knows he can't argue and win an argument with the doctor. He was a postgraduate in medicine and also a very good homeopathic doctor. So he knew how to argue. So Ishan says, sir, I can't argue anymore. I don't like arguments. He was a simple man. He had a lot of faith. So people with faith normally do not like to argue. Then Sri Ramakrishna's support does not agree with him. He says, you may not like argument, but why not speak out the truth about what is right? If you feel something is right, it is your duty to tell it. Whether others accept or not, you have to speak out the truth. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna, that is the nature of a child. A childlike person will speak out the truth without caring for what other people think, and whereas a mature person will think twice before saying something. So Sri Ramakrishna in this mode is telling now Ishan, you just tell what you feel is true. You don't have to quarrel with him, but what is your conviction? You have to tell, why are you so much afraid? You just tell what you feel is right. Then Ishan is telling the doctor. Now he tries to indirectly tell the doctor why you are not accepting an incarnation of God. He can't say that you have a very strong ego of knowledge, that's why you don't. So he is giving an indirect story of Ramayana. He says, because of our ego, we people have little faith. Very little faith. Kakbhushundi, the crow, did not accept Ramchandra as an incarnation of God in the beginning. So there is a story where a crow is normally supposed to be a very egotistic and a clever bird. People don't like to be compared with the crow, not because it is black, but also because it is a very clever and a very chalak type of bird. It's very proud. It thinks it is very. Its ego makes him feel very proud, and it's also a bit clever, no doubt. But that cleverness is a negative type of cleverness. It's not a cleverness from a beneficial point of view. So it's a very harmful ego that a crow has. So here in Ramayana, this crow is there, and he did not accept Ramchandra as an incarnation of God in the beginning. So what happened? At last, after it had wandered through the regions of the moon and the gods and had gone to Kailash, it saw that there was no way to free itself from Rama. It started hating, said, I can't believe. But then there was no other way. It went here, went there in search of truth, but it could not. Finally, he says, so it surrendered itself and taking shelter in Rama. Rama then took it in his hand and swallowed it. So it is a significant story It is a symbolic story. Bhushundi saw that even though it was still perched on its tree, pride having left it, it understood that though outwardly Ramchandra was a human being like others, yet he had the whole universe in his belly. The sky, the moon, the stars, the sun and the planets, ocean, hills, men, beasts, trees and so on. All these were in his stomach. So this vision, by the grace of Sri Rama, this crow had, and then it lost its pride and its ego, and then it became transformed. So this is a story. Ishan is saying that one day, if Sri Ramakrishna's grace is there, or the Avatara's grace is there, you will also realize the truth of this fact that God can descend as a human being. The Supreme Reality can, otherwise who will show us the way to that reality? Somebody who has been there, somebody who has touched, only he can show you. So that reality, when it manifests itself as a human being, shows us the way to true spirituality. That is what this story implies actually in Ramayana. So Ishan is telling this story to the doctor with the hope that he will get a hint and understand. So Sri Ramakrishna tells the doctor now, it is very difficult to understand, because he knew that the doctor believed in a formless God, just as any scientist would believe. They don't mind accepting the reality that we see around us, some deep reality which is God. They do not know what it is, but definitely it is not without it is not with any form. It is formless. So Sri Ramakrishna says to the doctor, it is very difficult to understand that he is both limitless and formless and also with form. How can both things exist together? So he agrees, it is very difficult to understand. Why do we don't understand? Because we use our stupid minds, our limited minds, to understand something which is unlimited. So he says the absolute belongs to the same being as the phenomenal world. Prakriti that you see around us cannot be separated from the Purusha. It doesn't have an independent existence. As we discussed in Gita yesterday, the consciousness, the pure consciousness pervades the whole Prakriti, all the small objects of Prakriti, as a string passes through a necklace. A necklace is made of a string which passes through the different beads. Similarly, this Prakriti is interwoven, or consciousness is something which is at the back or support of this. So you can't separate. So he says that the absolute or the pure consciousness, undifferentiated consciousness, is the same as Prakriti, but from different viewpoints. So how can we force ourselves with our little intelligence, small intelligence and ego, to say that he can't become a man? How can we say what can that absolute do? The absolute can manifest itself, it can choose not to manifest, it can choose to manifest itself as thousands and millions of animals, cells and other things, or if it wishes, it can withdraw all these things and manifest itself through one person or many persons at the same time. Can our little intelligence realize all these things, complicated things? Can one seer pail contain 4 seers of milk? So if our capacity to think is limited, within that limited capacity we can understand some things of Prakriti, not all. A physicist can understand physics, but he can't claim that he understands everything. He can't say that he understands biology. He has one glass and he cannot carry 4 glasses of water. His pail or his jug is limited. So our minds are incapable of understanding God in his entirety. We can understand one aspect of God through the mind, but through experience we can understand God as it is, as he is, or as it is, the reality as it is. So you have to put your faith in the words of these holy men, the great souls, the great incarnations who have realized God. Now somebody who has gone to Banaras can tell you what that Banaras is like. You can't get an idea of Banaras by somebody who has just seen the map and some pictures of Banaras. You have to appreciate, or you have to gather your knowledge from people who have actually been there. Their knowledge is to be likely to be more accurate. So because they have seen it, they have experienced it. So you have to you have to put your faith in these holy men. They contemplate God constantly, just as a lawyer remains involved with its lawsuit. If you want to know anything about law, you go to a lawyer because he is thinking of law day and night. A layman cannot be expected to file a lawsuit. He has to go to a lawyer because of his constant occupation with these ideas of law. He knows everything about law, but he may not know a single word about physics, or he may know very little about physics. So you don't go to a physicist to understand law. You have to go to a lawyer. So he says, if you want to know about God, it is very logical that you have to go to a person who thinks about God constantly. Otherwise, you will get a limited idea. It's just like learning law from a physicist. He may be able to teach you physics, whatever little he knows or whatever he knows, but definitely can't teach you law. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is saying. Can you believe in the words of Kakbhushundi? So he says, Kakbhushundi gave a version of Rama, but don't think that is all. That crow might have seen the whole universe, but what does it understand about that? Does it understand the real nature of Rama? It might have a vision, a small vision, but you cannot trust that word, those people's words. So you have to pay faith in the words of holy men who have touched God, who have become one with God. Doctor says, I have faith in what I think is right. Now he's coming back to his own rational way of thinking, very egotistic way of thinking. He says, I have faith in what I think is right. What I think means what my mind says is right. Then I don't care what others think. Now this is not the right attitude. This is an attitude born out of ego. And then he says, once I have faith, I don't doubt. But how can I call Rama an incarnation of God? Because I don't think it is right. But the day I think it is right, I will believe in him. That is what he's trying to tell Sri Ramakrishna. And telling him that, no, I can't do that. Then first take the murder of Vali. Now he is giving some incidents from Ramayana which he does not like. And says, how can God do all these things? He says, take the killing of Vali. Rama killed him with his arrow and hid himself like a thief. This is how a man acts, not God. God doesn't act like this. Now, this is what our rational people go on and on, questioning these great people. So Girish Ghosh then says, in trying to argue against the doctor, he says, sir, only God could do such a thing. Then doctor says, and then remember his forsaking of Sita. So how can a God do that? It is only a human being that will do this. Girish says, sir, this also could be done by God, not by man. Now these are the arguments going on between Girish and the doctor. Ishan tells the doctor, why don't you believe in the incarnation of God? Now these people are trying to force doctor to believe. You yourself have said that he who has created forms has form, and he who has created the mind is without form. You have just said that anything is possible for God. Then Sri Ramakrishna laughs. He interrupts and saying, that God cannot incarnate in a human form is not mentioned in his science. He says that God, which is not mentioned in his science books, how can he incarnate? He is just joking. He says he will believe what his books tell him. He is limited to that only. So perhaps he has not found any evidence of that in his books in science. So how can he believe it? So he says, how can he believe it? Even if you try to convince him, he will not believe it. Then Sri Ramakrishna tries to explain giving a parable immediately, because he knew the people who were sitting around nearby, they were all not capable of understanding arguments and this reasoning. So he thought, let me tell a parable which conveys the same idea, the same reasoning, but with a lot of force. So he says, listen to this story. Somebody said, brother, I have just been to a place where I saw a house fall down with a terrible crash. So he has seen this incident in some part of the city. The listener was an English educated person. He said, wait a minute, let me see if it is in the newspaper. He didn't find the news of a house falling in the paper, so he said, I say, brother, I don't believe you. It isn't in the newspaper, so it isn't true. So there are people who think everything that the newspaper publishes is true. And until I read for myself, there are some people, if somebody has a conviction and tells, I know this is true, they will say, no, let me just confirm it myself. He has his own way of correcting somebody's faith or confirming certain things. And for this person, it was newspaper. So that if it has not come in a particular news, say BBC or some important news, then it should not be true. It's just a rumor. I can't believe you. But the person says, I have seen it myself. So that Sri Ramakrishna is trying to tell everybody that if an incarnation comes and tells that he has seen God, only a few will understand. Most of them will doubt, and because of their egos and because of their limitations of intellectual knowledge, they will try to argue and not have faith. So that is why Holy Mother said, one who has faith has everything. So one has to look out for people with faith. What Sri Ramakrishna, Girish tells the doctor, you will have to accept Sri Krishna as God. I won't allow you to look on him as man. You have to call him either God or a demon. So now Girish attitude is typical of a person who has faith. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna used to say, in spite of all the evil qualities, Girish could realize God, or Girish could get the highest because of his faith. He did not have a pure life, he did not have anything. But his faith was so much. That is why people with faith, Holy Mother said, faith is everything. If one has a firm conviction that God can save me, or this person who has incarnated as God, Sri Ramakrishna, can save me. Now that faith was so deep in Girish Ghosh that he did not even care. He said, whether whatever you may argue, you have to accept Sri Krishna as God or Sri Ramakrishna as God. So you will have to either call him God or you call a demon and you leave this place. But you can't call him he's a man because of the exploits of Krishna, Sri Krishna. So then Sri Ramakrishna tells something very significant. Sri Ramakrishna is listening to all these conversations and quarrels of the devotees. Then Sri Ramakrishna concludes by saying, unless you are simple at heart, you can't have faith in God easily. God is very, very far from a person having a worldly intellect. A worldly intellect always creates doubts, and different kinds of pride appear. The pride of learning, the pride of wealth, and so on. But he, the doctor, he is simple at heart. Now, in spite of his intellectual learning, Sri Ramakrishna knew that whatever Girish might say, the doctor is coming here again and again, spending hours together with Sri Ramakrishna. Though he does not believe in certain things, but because of his faith, because his heart has that faith, though he openly doesn't want to accept, which he will ultimately accept. He accepted at the end of his life. But at that time, Sri Ramakrishna could see inside him. Said he is a man with a simple heart. He does not have a complicated heart. Right now he may be speaking out the truth. As people with faith also, they sometimes, because they are so truthful, they have that inherent faith, and that faith can pull them through. But at the same time, they will not say yes to anything. They will keep, because they are truthful. They're truthful to everything. I've seen people, I've seen devotees, I've seen simple people, or I've seen uh, even educated, very highly qualified people who have faith in everything a holy person tells them. They have a blind sort of faith, and that faith is so firm that for those persons, those things will become true. The more the faith, the more true it becomes. Sri Ramakrishna mentioned this in the previous conversation. He says everything is faith. If you have a firm belief that the poison of the snake will not kill you, it will not kill you. So the Manomaya Kosha, the intensity with which the buddhi and the mind can transform the pranamaya and the annamaya kosha is what we normally call as miracles. It may appear as a miracle, but the power of mind and the power of the Vijnanamaya kosha buddhi is infinitely superior because it is more subtle. So the subtler the faith, the scientist's faith is in the physical. They have faith in the physical reality. They have faith in the prana, the pranamaya kosha, the energies, the matter and energy, that is the field. But as they go deeper, as they go subtle, their faith increases. So also in spirituality, some people have faith in their physical ability. They have faith in their intelligence, their manomaya kosha. And they believe that by our intellect we can rule everybody. By our physical prowess we can do whatever we like, we can push down anybody whom we like and just go and get success. But it is short-lived. The grosser it is, the shorter it will live. So the wise man knows that the higher we go, the more control we have. That is why Sri Ramakrishna is hinting that the pride of learning, pride of wealth, these things you cannot have. If these things are there, you can't have faith in God easily. If you have faith in God, if you have faith in the power of God, then that means that your mind has risen to a much higher level and is not gross at all, though outwardly it may appear to be gross. So Girish tells the doctor, "Sir, what is your opinion? Can a deceitful person ever attain spiritual knowledge?" Doctor, "Oh Lord, could he ever gain knowledge?" Sri Ramakrishna, "How simple Keshav Sen was. One day he came to the Kali temple, he saw the guest house. He asked, it was 4 o'clock, when are the guests and the poor going to be fed? The more faith you have, the more spiritual knowledge you will gain. A cow which is choosy in fodder does not give much milk." Now this is an example which was keenly observed by Sri Ramakrishna. In rural Bengal, a lot of cows used to go for the cowherds had an intuition that a particular cow, some cows were very choosy about the grass. They would not eat anything and everything, but others would do. But they gave less milk. But the cow that gobbles anything you give, vegetable leaves, skin, straw, yields streams of milk. Everybody laughs. This may be a very simple observation, but it speaks volumes. It says a person who has full faith in whatever he has been told in spiritual life, and he has faith in his guru and faith in his Ishta, the God and the holy people. Such people, by virtue of their faith, they can get through, not the rational people. So Sri Ramakrishna says, unless you are simple at heart, you cannot have faith in God easily. God is very far from a person who is having a worldly intellect. That means a cunning attitude towards life and towards people. Because that worldly intellect thinks of itself as wise and tries to argue and does not clutch at anything. To hold on to something, to focus the mind on something, the buddhi has to be purified. It can't be doubting all the time. That is why in the Gita it is said, Sanshayatma Vinashyati. A person who is always doubting. There is this famous doubting Thomas. So anybody who doubts, his spiritual path is blocked. He cannot go further. It's faith and faith alone that opens the door. So that is the conclusion. So Sri Ramakrishna, and then we come to the last paragraph. He says, unless you have faith of a child, you can't realize God. The mother says he is your elder brother. The child has such faith that he believes him to be his brother without the least doubt. The mother says there is a bogeyman outside. The child believes 100% that there is a bogeyman in the room or outside. God bestows his mercy on him who has the faith of a child. You cannot attain God with a worldly intellect. So, now the doctor will go further and he will create more confusion. Doctor will tell the devotees now, it isn't good to drink milk from a cow that eats all sorts of things. Now he is again going back to science. Sri Ramakrishna has said something which he has observed in nature. That a cow who is very choosy, that means who is full of doubt whether I should eat this or eat that, who doesn't have a firm faith, that doesn't give milk. And it is a fact. Whereas the doctor is telling the devotees, it's not good to drink milk from a cow that eats all sorts of things. We used to feed our cow anything and later I fell very ill. I wondered what the reason could be. After a great deal of inquiry, I found that it had been eating everything. That created a lot of problems. I had to go to Lucknow to get cured. In the end, it cost me 12,000 rupees, roars of laughter. So, well, then the doctor says it's not easy to see the relation between cause and effect. When misfortune falls, when misfortune falls and why it falls, one cannot tell. A 7-month-old girl of a family of the Paikpara gentleman fell ill with whooping cough. I went there to treat her. I could not uncover the cause of her illness until I found that she had drunk the milk of an ass that had gotten wet in the rain. So Sri Ramakrishna is making fun of his science. Now, this is what the doctor is telling, that a cow which eats anything and everything doesn't give. That is contrary to what the farmers and the cowards know. Sri Ramakrishna says, what do you mean? It's like saying my cab passed under a tamarind tree and I suffered from acidity. The doctor and all others laugh. Doctor laughing. The captain of a ship had a bad headache. After consultation, the doctor had a poultice applied to the side of the ship. So he thought by correcting something externally, I can cure my headache. So it is as ridiculous as that. So here Sri Ramakrishna seems to be telling that this faith does not come unless one has that simplicity of a child. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling the doctor, anyway, it is necessary to keep the constant company of holy people. This disease has become chronic, the disease of worldliness. One has to act on their advice and not just listen to them. One has to take the medicine and control one's diet. The diet prescribed by a doctor is important. So now he comes to gives an example which the doctor will understand. He says, just keeping holy company is not enough. One should have a childlike faith in the words of a person who is holy. Then you will have effect. It's just like having faith in the doctor will not help. We have to have faith in the medicine and practice it. Take the medicine and follow the diet instructions and everything. If we have faith, then you can be cured. So it is ultimately faith that cures. Faith in the instructions. So also in spiritual life, it is faith in the instructions of these great people or the holy people or satsanga can be the solution for all our worldly problems. So now I will stop and we can have some questions now. Yes. Can even type on chat. Any questions?
Yeah, Pranam Swamiji, this is Geeta once again.
Yes.
So, Swamiji, Ramakrishna didn't have any linkage to Lord Shiva?
Why? He worshipped every god, so many paths he followed. Why not Shiva? Everybody.
Okay.
You can see him singing Shiva songs, Divine Mother song. He followed all the paths, not only of Hinduism but also other religions as well. So he has not left out any path. Most of the popular paths of Hinduism he has practiced. So he had no problem with any Shiva or any all gods because he knew, and he had that insight because he had seen reality. So in and through all the gods and goddesses that he worshipped, he saw that same Satchidananda shining, and that's why he could tell us that in essence, all the paths lead to the same reality. So Shiva is also no exception. Okay.
Swamiji?
Yes.
I have a question, Maharaj.
Yes.
You said earlier on that the childlike vision or the personality means purity, and worldly maturity robs this.
This is what Swamiji said. Swamiji, when speaking to Josephine McLeod, the sayings in the 9th volume, I came across a paragraph. It says, as the child starts knowing, knowledge means the world knowledge, robs him of his childlike vision. And higher knowledge, through higher knowledge, he is again able to regain. So the child, when he grows, the worldly knowledge or the secular knowledge robs him of that childlike vision, and it becomes more and more complicated. Complexes start coming, superiority, pride, and all the qualities which were not there in his childhood. Now, that doesn't mean that he has to become a child again. He has already grown up to be a man. But he can regain that knowledge, not regain that body. One doesn't have to become a child. That is what Sriram Swamiji says. So, what is the question?
So, the question is, how can we get the child to grow up keeping that and yet be worldly? Is it possible?
No, it both cannot be there. The worldly means one does not have. See, all secular knowledge does not make one worldly. One can have knowledge of physics without being worldly. One can have knowledge of medicine without being worldly. Worldliness is there are two types of knowledge, Paravidya and Aparavidya. One which helps you to navigate Prakriti, another which enables you to reach the Purusha. Now, that which helps you survive in this world is known as Aparavidya, and Paravidya is the highest. So both Para and Aparavidya should be given together to the child. So he takes only the beneficial Aparavidya. He doesn't develop that ego, the pride, jealousy, and other things. So you can call them modern terminology. It is known as life skills and professional skills or occupational skills. Skills which enable you to find an occupation or do things in the world. That is one type of skill. And life skills enable you to be a better person. Learning to know, learning to do is Aparavidya. And learning to be a good person, to be a noble person, to be an unselfish person. So that is the realm of Paravidya. So that purity as well as love for knowledge, both if they are together, then one gains knowledge. One excellent example can be given is Abdul Kalam, for example. He led an exemplary life. See his personal life. It very clearly shows he was not at all a worldly person by any standard. If you see till the end of his life. But he was an excellent scientist. He even became the president. but the simplicity with which he lived. I'm just giving you a simple example. There are many, many, many thousands of examples, but very clearly we can see that he did not have to sacrifice his other skills, but those skills did not make he retained that childlikeness or that simplicity that's why he could mix very easily with children. He was so fond of children. If you see, he was more comfortable with them, and they also could connect with him.
Yeah.
So that is an example that shows that what childlikeness with intellectual maturity can do. So if we take both the positive, one doesn't have to be worldly to become intelligent. One can be intelligent without being worldly. That is what Sri Ramakrishna is hinting at. You see, even doctor also he praised him, says he has got a simple heart. But still, you see, he's arguing, he's talking, swearing by science. He's such a good doctor. He's an excellent physician. But at the same time, he has retained. That's why he's defending him before Girish. He says, see, maybe arguing with me, but at the same time, he has a simple heart. Okay, somebody is.
Pranam Maharaj, this is Sudeep from San Francisco.
Yes.
I have Pranam Maharaj, I have a question.
Yes.
What happened to Dr. Sarkar towards the end of his life? Because he is an outstanding scientist. He formed the Indian Cultivation of Science.
Yes. ISCS in Jadavpur. Yes.
That's right. Yes. He is absolutely super in his time and even now.
Yeah.
So what happened to him towards the end?
Towards the end, we know that he started that association, which also through which C.V. Raman got a Nobel Prize much later. He had died much before that. But he spent his whole life donating to the cause of science, because not that he has to give up science. Sri Ramakrishna never told Girish also to give up drama and all his intellectual pursuits. But at the same time, the spiritual transformation was definitely there, though it was not so noticeable in the case of Dr. Sarkar. But he was a very honest and a nice person, because when the British government refused to give him money or the facilities to permission to open the university, he did on his own. Even the land was not given. They tried. Whereas he did not compromise and he held on to the principle. In fact, Tata, when he started Indian Institute of Science, he had to agree to make the director. They said the director of the institute will be appointed by the British. Whereas, under that condition, or with that condition only, they were allowed to start the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore. So Tata had to agree, otherwise that institute would not have got the permission. Whereas IACS suffered because he refused to compromise. In fact, Tata's representative, Mr. Padsha, came to meet him because he knew he had already started his institute for research. So Amrutlal Sarkar, the son of this Sarkar, Mahendralal Sarkar, Amrutlal, he was also quite old at that time. He was quite young at that time. He took charge of the institute later on. So Mahendralal Sarkar told him, don't listen to that condition. This institute should be for Indians, by Indians, and should be headed by Indians. So he had to face terrible financial difficulties. It did not succeed in the beginning. But even in spite of that, C.V. Raman later on, who became the first director of Indian Institute of Science, the first Indian director, after many years, because the British government did not want to lose control. Though they did not help financially, money was given by Maharaja of Mysore, land was given by Maharaja of Mysore, little money was given by them, and Tata's own money was there. But they did not allow British did not allow him to have his own Indian director. Though there were good people, Jagdish Chandra Bose himself was there. But they said, no, we can't. But IACS continued in poverty, of course. They did not have the funds. Nobody wanted to help them also because they were afraid of the British government. So he died a sad man, according to the sad in the sense because of he could not fulfill his achievement or whatever he had planned. But his son wrote a nice biography. If you are interested, you can read that.
Yes. I was thinking about the second question. Is that
Yeah. So there is a nice. I'll get you the name of that book. It's a wonderful book written by his own son, where he shows how many difficulties Mahendralal Sarkar had to face, but he never compromised on truth, and so that is the great achievement. His contact with Sri Krishna, he held on to his own faith, and he believed that he will not give up. And somehow, but then that did not give him worldly success. He preferred not to take the help that way by compromising on principles. So that is one good quality of his which he had.
right?
We don't know
Is there
the
any specific book Maharaj? Sorry, is there any specific book Maharaj between Thakur and Mohan Sholkar's
no
conversations?
specific book, but this book will give you a lot of
Okay.
references because Swami Sharadananda, Sister Nivedita, and
Okay.
Sri Krishna visited his laboratory and saw the microscope, which was a new thing in those days. You know, at least for Sri Krishna, it was new. So there is a nice incident where Sri Krishna goes, but he is not able to see through the microscope. He goes into samadhi. Twice he tries. Then they tell him that a small strand of hair will appear like a big stick. You just see through this. So they take him very near the telescope. I don't know why, the microscope. And suddenly he goes into samadhi. So then they fail to make him see through that. We don't know the reason, but somehow he doesn't, though he visited his laboratory, he could not see through that. The very idea of maybe magnification gave him the idea of God. So at the slightest provocation, even the zoo, when he saw the lion, he saw the Divine Mother Durga there and he went into samadhi. So Sri Krishna definitely had loved him as a human being, but how much spiritually he benefited, we do not know. Spiritually, his spiritual background that is not mentioned in the book because his son was not so much interested. He just mentioned about his discoveries, about his efforts to promote science. That's all. But he believed science is also a path to truth, which Swamiji also agreed. Swami Vivekananda visited. Swami Sharadanand used to come sometimes go and give talks there. So they had contact with the Ramakrishna mission also later on, even after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna.
Thank you, Maharaj.
There are a few questions. 1 minute. Let me, in the chat, there are a few questions. Yeah, anybody wants to ask?
Swami, I'd like to ask.
Elaine has asked one question. Faith grows, Swami. How do we enhance its growth apart from its practice? Gratitude is similar. It needs to be nurtured. No, gratitude and faith are different things. Faith, you don't have to, you have to definitely nurture. Faith grows only through practice. If you, a doctor gets faith in his skill to operate only if he practices operations for a long time, isn't it? The more he practices, he becomes a excellent doctor and his faith increases. He's ready to take the most complex cases. Similarly, you will find that when a person is a spiritual practitioner also, when he starts practicing japa and whatever instructions, the faith in the japa or faith in whatever practice he does, it increases. It is just repeated practice of anything gives you faith in that. If a doctor has faith in his skills, if the faith has to increase, then he has to repeatedly do it. So whatever you repeatedly do, Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of a lawyer. Now, to know anything about law, you have to go to a lawyer because he's always thinking about law and lawsuits and all those things. So also to get to we have faith in some lawyers because they have always been at law. They have been working hard to study one aspect of that of many subjects. So somebody who is an expert in vaccines will have faith in that person to give us the right vaccine. You will not trust anybody. So also faith is like that. So now that is apart from its practice, there is no other way. There is one more way which we call the grace of God. So by the grace of God, of course, anything can happen. Now that grace has to come. Sometimes we may think it is grace, but it is just a result of our past karma. That ultimately it boils down to that even the grace comes but because of some wonderful deeds done by us, because we really deserved it in the past. We may not see it in this life, but maybe something which we inherited made us fit to receive the grace. So by grace also faith can increase. But even then, Sri Ramakrishna believes, Sri Ramakrishna always used to say that by practice alone, even he had to practice the divine name. He said, no, because I repeat the Holy Mother, Divine Mother's name, people respect me. So that means one has to gain faith by practice first. And the Sri Ramakrishna used to give another example. When the wind of grace is always blowing, but we have to unfurl the sails. The sails of the boat, if they are lying down, then the wind may be blowing, but the boat will not move. But the moment we have to make some effort at least to raise the sails. So when we raise the sails, if you have seen those boats with sails, the boatman has to struggle a lot to keep the sails in the right position so that the wind flow pushes it forward, so that the boat can sail. So that raising of the sail is our sadhana, repeating of the God's name, and the grace automatically comes then. Grace flows as a result. So gratitude is a different quality, virtue. But gratitude has nothing to do directly with faith. But a faithful person, definitely a person with faith, will have gratitude towards the thing which is giving him or her faith. Suppose you believe in the grace of God, will you not be grateful will you not express your gratitude to God? Though Sri Ramakrishna says he doesn't expect your gratitude, that's why he says a person who feels some God is your own father and mother, then doesn't go to thank the idea of thanking God does not exist in Hinduism. Because it's a close relationship like that of a father or mother. So the child does not keep on thanking. It may thank strangers if somebody helps. But if the mother helps, even if it doesn't thank, it's close relationship. So to have faith is more important than just gratitude. Gratitude may help when you want to thank some stranger, but if God is your own, then you don't have to thank him or her. That is what Sri Ramakrishna said. It's a subtle difference, but that is what. There's one more question.
Thank you, Swami.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. There is one more question by Sandipan, which is how to find which path, knowledge or bhakti, is suitable for you. Can it be a mix or of both? Yes, it has to be decided by the type of mind you have. If you are predominantly emotional in nature, then bhakti can be more useful. But if you are predominantly thinking or rational by nature, if you depend more on thinking than feeling, if you have strong feelings, if you have nice feelings, then the feelings can be converted into bhakti easily. So it depends on which faculty of the mind you have in excess. So, but both, the best thing is to mix bhakti, not only bhakti, but Jnana and also Raj Yoga and Karma Yoga, the will. So it's not just enough to have bhakti as well as knowledge. You have to have the willpower. So you have to work out both bhakti and knowledge, that is Karma Yoga. When you perform bhakti, when you perform devotions, or when you stay, go on in the quest of knowledge for a long time, persistently, in both the cases, to develop bhakti as well as to develop knowledge, you require a willpower. Otherwise, you give up. After some devotion, you give up. Or after some knowledge, gaining some knowledge, you just get tired and give up. So even Karma Yoga is necessary to strengthen the will. And that comes by meditation, which is Raj Yoga. We dam the water. We stop the outflow of water, stop it at certain stage and divert it to increase our prana. So Raj Yoga is the motor of our all the yogas. It gives energy to all the yogas. Karma Yoga strengthens the willpower. Bhakti Yoga strengthens the emotional side of the mind. And Jnana Yoga makes your thinking rational, logical, and discriminative. To discriminate between what is good and what is bad. For that, Jnana Yoga is also necessary. So all three yogas are necessary. Sri Ramakrishna did not prescribe bhakti because most of the people who came to him, you have to see the context. They were simple people who did not have the capacity of thinking. So he would have told them, if you see the characteristics of the devotees who came, many of them were simple-hearted. For them, bhakti is definitely more suitable. If they can mix it with jnana, it is fine. Otherwise, bhakti also is capable of giving you jnana and other yogas. So that is another question. How to find? Now, I think I have answered this question. And the last question is, I will answer this and then we'll stop. If we feel we are experiencing a miracle, how can we differentiate whether it is our imagination or a real? There is no miracle as such. See, the idea of miracle, when do we call a thing a miracle? If Girish Chandra Ghosh's mind was changed from evil to good, that is a miracle, but people will not call it a miracle. Apparently, they will not. They think miracle means materializing certain things, getting some gross objects, or suddenly getting a lottery or something. These are not miracles. These are all coincidences. They are not miracles. The real miracle, according to Swamiji, is that it should bring about a transformation in the character. That is the only miracle worth having. So we don't have to differentiate it with imagination or reality. When we see a transformation in ourselves, we have to know that a miracle is already happening. Otherwise, many things happen which appear to be miracles, which appear to be coincidence. They may help you to increase your faith. But apart from that, they are not just imaginations. They are, if it is an outcome of faith, even the trivial incident, sometimes you have faith in certain things and these happen. Though they may happen because of previous karma and all the coincidences or your good work of previous births. But still, if you want to think that it is a miracle, you can do, but it doesn't help much. They are just supporting things, small things, if it helps to increase your faith, if it helps to transform you, then miracles are good. That is how we should look upon these miracles. Okay? So I'll take your leave now. It's almost 6:10. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Swami.
Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste.
Pranam Maharaj. Pranam Maharaj.
Namaste.
Maharaj.
Pranam.
Thank you, Maharaj.